We are continuing our series, Staying on the Beam, and today will be part 2 of what we discussed last week, which is about timely and timeless. The topic of timely and timeless, how to balance these two paradoxes. Now, this, I believe, topic is very timely in a sense because of how fast our world is moving, how fast we are seeing changes. I just remember maybe in our own, you are also surprised of how quickly things have changed, even in our own generation, even in our own time. According to world standards of different generation, I belong to the millennial generation. And I also experienced changes. You know, when I was a kid, all I had was a Game Boy. That was like my gadget. That was my device. But now, like, kids have phones, smartphones that can contact people from across the world. All I had was a AA powered Game Boy device, and I was lucky enough to have the color version. So they're like, what? Yes, there were even devices that had no color. I can just imagine my parents' generation of all the changes that they're experiencing now. Maybe you can relate. Before, I remember my mom telling me a story how in their neighborhood, they were the only family with the television, the first set of television in their entire neighborhood. So the entire neighborhood within a 5-mile, 2.3 kilometer, I don't know how to convert, radius would go to their house to watch big events. And the entire neighborhood would just rally. And now we have a screen in the hands of every single human being. Even a 2-year-old has a screen, right? And it's connected to the worldwide internet. They can access everything. My mom, in her days, when she had a television, she only had 2 channels. And maybe a third channel if they hit the TV hard enough, get an extra channel. But my point is, even now we're experiencing so much changes even in our lifetime. So can you imagine how much more of a change that we'll experience in the future? And of course, we just went through a pandemic, and I'm sure that had sped so much of what life is and what the possibility of life, how fast things are communicated, how fast news travel, how fast that we are able to communicate with the world and come out with procedures. Yes, it was frustrating at some point, but at the same time, we were able to hurdle this within a 2-year span. So I think that's very fast. I'm sure this could have lasted way longer. So we see that there's progress, and progress is good. We see that there are changes, and changes are sometimes good. However, I think what we need to do to balance progress and how fast things are changing is to remind ourselves of timeless values. What are things in the past that we must still carry on with us? What are important lessons and timeless stories that we need to continue to carry with us to the future, despite all the changes, despite all the adjustments and the pivoting that our world is facing right now. Well, in the ancient times, and I'm sure we feel that there's so much change happening, but people throughout history experience this. It's nothing new. Can you imagine when the first time the light bulb was invented, people were like, oh, this is sorcery. Can you just imagine how surprised people were, how shocked people were? So when Thomas Edison created the light bulb, oh my goodness, we no longer have to use candlelight. We can light up our streets. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be, and I'm sure they had so many things to say. This is the end of the world. This is demonic, whatever comments people will say. They faced it back then. We're facing it now. It's nothing new. But what people carried, what the ancients carried, were still values, morals, ethics, things that were important for humanity, that carry that not just external changes, but things that shouldn't change. The lessons of humility, grace, forgiveness, compassion, excellence, progress. These were the things that carried us despite all the changes. Now the ancients, now I'm talking about ancients, thousands of years ago, also experienced changes. The ancients in the Bible were also experiencing changes. For them, moving to a new land was a drastic change. Of course, for us, we travel to another country within a few hours, but for them to travel to another country was a big change. A big change of scene, a big change of adjusting, getting along, communicating, socializing. These were big changes. So how did they do it? Well, God always had to remind them of the important things of life. In Joshua 4, so Joshua, the entire tribe of Israel, the nation of Israel, moving out of slavery into the land of promise, had to go through this transition. In verse 4, it says, So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, What do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel. Ano po? Forever. So today's five ever. I don't know. So forever, for all life. So God would just set reminders for the people. It's like these are for the future. As you advancing is good. As you progress, as you make changes, as you make adjustments in order for you to live a better life in the future. However, take these with you. Let these be a reminder for you of what God has done. That God is still the same God of yesterday, today, and forever. God is the God of miracles. God is the God that does wonders. And tell these to your children so that they may be a reminder to you and the people of Israel forever. Now, if I were to ask you po, do you have a tradition? Does your family have a tradition po? Maybe sa Christmas po, maybe I don't know, maybe different traditions here in Dubai, because your families are from are far away. Maybe we have different traditions in America, how we celebrate. We definitely have different celebrations and holidays in America, in the Philippines, in Dubai. But we all have traditions po, right? So whatever that may be, sa New Year's po, we all have traditions. So as a Korean family, we also have certain traditions. We have Solnar, we have it's like a fall festival. We have like Moon Festival where families gather, we eat. However, so think of it like this, po. All holidays, all festivals, all traditions are kind of like reminders, aren't they? Right, po? So when we celebrate Christmas, of course, it's a reminder for us the gift of Christ. That God is here. God has sent his son. When we celebrate, for example, in the States, Thanksgiving, it's a reminder for us to be thankful. A reminder for us of the history of the States and how it began, to the Declaration of Lincoln that proclaimed and made it a national holiday of the Civil War, of all the death and all the pain that people had to endure as a nation, and it was a day to give thanks. Yet, because we're moving so fast, we seem to lose and forget the real reminders of why we celebrate such days, such holidays, and such events. Right, po? Christmas is about the gift of Christ, and yet we get so wrapped up about gifts and presents and trying to be there, be present. We get so busy and caught up with the festivities and the preparations that we forget the real reminder. And that's what I guess that's something that we have to, again, remind ourselves over and over again. And the truth is, one of the greatest reminders for us as followers of Jesus is what we do not on a yearly basis, but actually on a weekly basis. So when we gather on a Saturday, when we gather on a Sunday, even online or on site, it is a weekly reminder of the Sabbath. It's the weekly reminder of rest, keeping the Sabbath day holy, coming before God, worshiping together. Yes, we get caught up in the songs, we get caught up in attending, we get caught up in showing up, in preparation. If you're part of a ministry, you have to make sure this is done, and so forth and so on. But the real essence of the weekend, the Saturday, the Sunday, the Sabbath, was to rest. And that is that's what I want to drive the point today, Paul, that the timeless reminder of rest, that God reminds us on a weekly basis when we gather together. It is a time of rest. Now, I would like to read for us a timeless passage as well. This has been a favorite passage for many people for many generations, and it's Psalm 23. But Psalm 23, when we're not careful, can be read and be interpreted maybe in our context of a busy life today in the opposite way of what it's supposed to really represent. This is a Psalm 23, the 23rd Psalm of the hurried life. Or in other words, try to replace hurry with restless life. When we don't rest, yes, we gather on a Saturday. Yes, we worship on a Sunday. But yet we're still restless. We're still pagod and tired, and where life feels draining and worn out, and Sunday doesn't feel like a day of rest. It just seems another add-on to our schedule. So this is the Psalm 23 of the restless life. Okay, Paul. The Lord has my back. I don't have time to seek him. I hurry past green pastures and still waters, seeking restoration for my soul. I bypass the paths of righteousness for productivity's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, if I stay busy enough, I can pretend not to notice. The Lord prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies. I may grab a quick bite on the way past. I anoint myself with accomplishments, draining my cup dry. Surely stress and fatigue shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall rush past the house of the Lord forever. Amen. But I think that's how it feels, right, Paul? This is a timeless psalm, and yet it's morphed. It's changed. Maybe some things shouldn't. Maybe some things we need to hold on to it as dearly, because those are the things that we need to, the unchanging qualities, the unchanging values that we need to carry with us through the changing times. And if Psalm 23 changes and adapts to our lifestyle today, we're in such danger of burning out. We're in such danger of angry people, frustrated people, tired people. We're serving God, but there's no joy. We're in church, we're worshiping together, but we're so upset, and we can't think of anything else but to go home. We're supposedly, our Saturday or Sunday is supposed to be a rest day. We're in the Lord, but yet we still look for rest in other places. Because we can enjoy life when there's a balance. We can enjoy life when there is sweetness and bitterness. We enjoy life when there's happiness and sadness. It's a balance. I think we would also find depression if we're always happy. Or we will not understand the fullness of life on this side of heaven, at least, when there's too much of just one thing. There needs to be a balance. As we progress, staying busy sometimes is a blessing, Paul, right? having work. And sometimes I tell, when I contact my parents and they ask me, how are you? And I say, I'm so busy. And they say, it's good. You're busy in the Lord. And I said, that's not what I wanted to hear, but okay, I guess so. I guess that's good. Is rather than being laid aside for God, you'd rather be used by God, right, Paul? So in a sense, busy is good, but there needs to be a balance to our busy, and it's a reminder that God has been reminding us since the beginning of time. Since the creation of the world, God has offered this reminder to humanity. Because on the seventh day of creation, what did God do? He rested. And he created that life pattern, and he relayed that to us as people to take a day of rest. That needs to be our lifestyle. That we are to learn the timeless reminder of Sabbath. And it's something that's been that has been present to us, gifted to us since the beginning of time. A.J. Swoboda says this. He says, the result of our Sabbath amnesia, that we forget, is that we have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually malnourished people in history. When we do not consider rest, the timeless reminder of rest, we will become emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually malnourished people in history. And isn't that a paradox? Because we're living in the greatest time, right, Paul? We're living in the fastest time. Everything that we need comes to us to our door. I learned to appreciate the gift of delivery all the more in Dubai. Because it's so hot to go out, even if it's only a few meters away. Few meters in this heat, it's like in eternity. All right, boy. Yeah, there's so many adjustments. Like you have to change clothes, you have to shower again, and, your skin changes. Everything changes. So we're living in this instant world where everything is accessible, everything is fast, information, what we need, groceries, what the supplies, internet, information. However, we become so tired, so burnt out if we forget this reminder of rest. Every week is a reminder for us to rest, pause, be still, not just in our activity, not idleness, but finding true rest in God. So let's look together. The actual version of Psalm 23, not the restless version that we're so accustomed to, not the hurried version that we find ourselves more familiar than the real message of Psalm 23. I'll be reading the Living Translation, and it begins in verse 1. It says, because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. And I can preach just on verse 1 today, but we have 6 verses to go. Who wrote this psalm? First of all, Paul, it was written by David in the Bible, and an actual historical figure. And who was David? David was a king of Israel, and they say he was the greatest king. He was a warrior, he was a conqueror, he was a ruler. But most of all, he had a humble beginning. He was a shepherd. And that's why you can see that this is a very personal psalm. It's a personal song because he writes God in a intimate, personal way. He's not writing a theory about God. He's not writing a philosophical, theological writing about God. This is just his own personal journal and his own personal reflection to project who God is to him. So he writes, God is my shepherd. And because he's my shepherd, as I was a shepherd, and I know what it means to be a shepherd, I know what it is to take care of my sheep, I know what it is to feed, I know the workload, I know the labor, I know what it takes to be a shepherd, and I can see that God is that perfect shepherd. And because he is that shepherd to me, I lack nothing. I have, in other words, in this translation, I have everything I need. So let's try to break these, just the first verse a little bit. David being the youngest of 7 brothers. Can you imagine? He's not saying, I have everything, I lived a great life. No, he had his own fair shares of unfairness. He has his own share of betrayal. He had his own share of pain. He has his own share of rejection. No, he being the youngest of 7 brothers. 7 brothers were actually excellent. They were warriors. They were also fighters and leaders in their own right. So can you imagine the family where he comes from, where his dad forgets that he exists? So I don't blame the dad if you had 8 boys in the family and all of them were accomplished, and you last one would sometimes slip your mind. It's like, oh my gosh, David, yes, there's David. So you can imagine the insecurity that maybe he felt sometimes, but he knew that he was always complete in the Lord. And the in the Hebrew translation, the word Lord, the name Lord, is often, if not all the time, translated to the name Yahweh. So it's not just, he wasn't just calling a title. He was not describing God, but he was calling God by a name, a specific name. A name that was first mentioned in the history of the Israelites to Moses. When Moses encountered God for the first time, he's like, who are you? And what should I say who you are? And God says in Exodus 3, he says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. And they titled that Yahweh. I am that I am. And it's a confusing name, but it covers everything. I am that being that exists. I am that cares for you. I am that loves you. I am that God that cares for you, that provides for you. And in that I have everything I need. So it's so important for us to address who God is in your life. Because if God is just a vending machine, then you'll treat him like a vending machine. I pray 3 hours, I expect a miracle of 3 hours. I attend church for 1 week, I should receive a blessing of 1 week. But if God becomes the I am, the great I am, the greatest of all, he is who he is. Not because of how I define him, not because of the circumstances that I've gone through, not because of any experience that anyone has ever described about him, but because he is just simply the God that is, I will have everything I need. Now, the meaning of I lack nothing is not about abundance. It's not saying, I am so rich, I lack nothing. Of course, you can say that because he's a king, but a lot of scholars say that this is David in his old age. This is the mature David, advanced in years, experienced life, all scopes of life. Like I said, he was a king, he was a father, he was a son, he was a leader, he was a general, he was a commander, he was a soldier. He's seen war, he's seen battles, he's seen bloodshed, he's seen pain, he's seen even his own family just fall apart. So he's at this very old David, and he finds himself just resting in God, knowing that I will lack nothing. I have everything I need. Not because everything is in abundance. Sometimes that's how we feel. I will feel like I lack nothing when I have everything that I want. But we know that that's not true. Because after you get that iPhone 13, they announced that iPhone 14 is going to come out. All right? And if you upgrade again this year, iPhone 14, you'll know that there's going to be an iPhone 15 next year. So why bother? Why keep adding on the payments? But that's why we feel like I just need the next thing. I just need the next hit. But David's saying, no, I have everything I need. I lack nothing because I have just enough. I have just enough. Sometimes we have a problem of ordering too much food. Do you ever have that problem, Paul? We order too much. We get so hungry. We're so gutom, and we're like, I just need everything. I just need to be satisfied. So we also order the entire table full of food. But what's the problem? We're full and we can't finish it. So we just say, okay lang, sige, we'll just baon, right? we'll just take it home. And we leave it in the fridge. And guess what happens? It just spoils. We forget to eat it. We're like, I spent so much. And I promised myself I would just eat this for the entire week, but it's old now. I like fresh food. That's what happens to us. That's why even in the wilderness, when God gave the Israelites manna, they said, don't store up manna because I will give you new manna tomorrow. Don't save up food because I will give you fresh food the next day. It's just having enough. Philippians 4, Paul echoes these words to the members of the church in Philippi. He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned this. Listen to this book. It's a secret. The secret of being content. Not everyone knows. Not everyone understands. It's the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Verse 13, I can do all things, all this through him who gives me strength. Who gives me strength is not about, I can do it, I can fly, I can conquer the world. Actually, sometimes the only strength that we need is knowing the secret of being content. God, I am okay where I'm at. This is good because you are my shepherd. This is good because you will guide me. You are provider. You are who you say you are. I am that I am. Yahweh is my shepherd, and I lack nothing. So let's continue, Paul, verse 2 and 3. What's the first thing? If Lord is my shepherd and we lack nothing, here's the first thing he does. He lets me, let's read it together. He lets me rest. He lets me rest in the meadow grass and leads me beside the quiet streams. He gives me new strength. He helps me do what honors him the most. A lot of times we think because God is my shepherd, I have nothing that I lack. I'm going to go evangelize. I'm going to start a church. I'm going to minister to every people possible. And those are good ambitions. I'm going to work hard for the Lord. But I am surprised that David being this king, this accomplished king, that was not the first agenda that he thought to himself if God is his shepherd. But the first list to do, as you are just a sheep that is led by Yahweh the shepherd, is to find rest. Is to rest. Because my God is my shepherd, the first thing on the list I'm so excited to do with God is rest. We would think otherwise. The first thing I want to do is I want to see how much I can do for him. But the first thing David found himself doing in the presence of God was rest. Now, studies reveal that 37% of Americans take fewer than 7 days of vacation a year. So this is, of course, the States, but see if you can also relate, Paul. In fact, only 14% take vacations that last longer than 2 weeks. Maybe for us also, we're very into work. Americans take the shortest paid vacations of anyone in the world, and 20% of those who do often spend their vacations staying in touch with their jobs through their computers or phones. How about you, Po? Do you ever take a vacation but you still bring your work with you? You're on vacation, but you're always on the phone. You have your laptop out. You're looking for Wi-Fi. Why? It's because I guess we're living in a world that we're so into progression. We're so into advancing. We're all about work. We're all about moving forward that we forget what it looks like to rest. The real meaning of rest. We don't know what resting is. We think Netflix is resting. We think gaming is resting. We think, ignoring problems is resting. No, we have the wrong idea of rest. But God has been reminding us to rest since the beginning of time, that God rested on the seventh day, and He commands the first order of His tribe of building a culture, building a society, was to remind the people, keep the Sabbath day holy. Take the rest. Have a break in your life. And even as Christians, we can say, well, that's the old commandments. That's the old paradigm. We're now in Jesus, who's the new paradigm. He's the new author of everything. And so we can kind of put rest, Sabbath to the side. But no, the true intention of rest, of course, I don't mean to go deep, but it's to really understand. Yes, you don't have to now, it's no limited to a certain day or a certain time, as the Jews have done it, but to rest in Jesus is an essential. To always find rest in God is a must. It's a timeless must as we move forward into the future. Learning how to rest. And that's the first agenda of God as the shepherd, leading us. And if you trust God to be your shepherd, He will lead you to rest. Dallas Willard says this, he says, rest is an act of faith. And I'm so sure that's, especially today, few people get the rest God intends for their well-being. It's an act of faith. Why po? Because when we feel like there's an urgency to do something, when we truly find rest, that is trusting in God. When we put aside our phones, when we turn off all the reminders and the notification and say, God, let me just find peace in you. Let me just find comfort in you. Let my mind not wander off from your presence, but to just enjoy this time of rest. That is an act of trust. And we might need it now more than ever. That might be a greatest model of faith than to move mountains, when we just are able to just steady our hearts and say, God, I just find real rest. Not just temporary, therapeutic, 30 minutes, but to find true rest in you. I let this day just be a day separated for you. Let my attention be fully given to you, even just for one day. That is to find an act of that is an act of faith. So we continue, Dallas Willard. It says, our confidence in God can lead us to lie down in green pastures and rest in God, putting our minds at ease because our hearts are at peace, so that we wake the next morning refreshed and thankful. Even temporary rest, what we call sleep, we have a hard time doing. Because when we feel like the more I can't sleep because I have so much things to stress about. I can't sleep, I can't rest because there's so much work to do. But even as we sleep, we're actually trusting the Lord. Lord, you allow me to find strength for the next day. God, help me to find rest so I'll be refreshed, wake up refreshed to face the following day. And Jesus extends that invitation. In Matthew 11, He says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. It's a constant reminder, the constant invitation that is offered to us to find rest. Ask yourself, do you find rest? When was the last time you really had a good night's sleep? When was the last time you just felt so relaxed and confident in the Lord? You trusted God with everything, that you just felt so at peace. No matter what you face, you were just so relaxed and just rested in God. When was the last time? According to God's reminder, it should have been last Saturday or last Sunday, because that is the day of Sabbath. But we might not even remember. When was the last time I really rested? I just took a vacation last week, but I'm still so stressed. I am in vacation right now, but I'm still so stressed. Because our rest is never in temporary things. Our rest is always in God is my shepherd. I have everything I need. Rest is to find hope, to find the center, find the joy and the purpose in God once again. That's why we rest. That's why we need to rest, because we forget. Remember, A.J. Swoboda said, we have Sabbath amnesia. That's why we need to remind ourselves, I'm resting so I can just center myself. I am resting in green pasture. This is not bad for me. This is good, because I can find joy in serving again the next day. This is good for me to rest today so I can find strength the next day. This is good for me to be near still waters, because I can find my hope going back to the office together tomorrow. Rest is good for me. Because we don't just lay down in green pastures, we continue in life, don't we, Paul? Verse 4, it says, even when walking through the dark valley of death, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me, guiding all the way. David was not ignorant of the fact that resting is not that God does all the time. It says, even though, it's not if, it says when. Even when walking through the dark valleys of death, even when life hits me, even when crises come, even when pain and suffering happens in my life, ano po, I will not be afraid, because you are near me. Now here's the thing of how we can handle fear. We have fear. We're just fearful people. We are born with fear. Did you know that, Paul? Automatically, that's just in us. I guess that's just our fallen nature, that we are automatically born with fear. That we automatically fear loud noises. So I won't do this, but if I were to say, right? We might not express it as different people, but it has that. We're also afraid of darkness, just naturally. When we're just babies and kids are just afraid of darkness, not seeing. So, and as we grow older, we develop new fears. We're afraid of ipis, and we're afraid of the water. We're afraid of heights, and we just dive into deeper sense of fear. Maybe a fear of death, fear of losing loved ones, fear of being unloved, and so forth and so on. And it becomes extreme cases of fear. We're just enveloped by a life of fear. And David recognized this, and David knew this, and he says, even when I walk through fear, whatever that fear may be, I will not be afraid. And it's not because David understood the art of calmness. He's not saying, I discovered myself and there's nothing to fear. No, he's not saying, I found confidence, I found courage, believing in myself. No, he's saying, simple, I don't fear because you're here. I am not afraid because God is beside me. I am not afraid because you guide me and you protect me. I am still fearful. Trust me. He's saying, no. I'm not saying I have overcame my fear. I am still very afraid. I'm afraid for my life. But I realize once I recognize God, Yahweh, I am that I am is my shepherd. And in him I have nothing I lack. Even my fears, I can trust him because he's there. I remember when I was a kid, po, I don't know where, Israel or Korea, po. I remember I was walking with my dad, maybe in Korea, po. So we were like at a prayer mountain area, so very wild wilderness forest. And I remember encountering a dog with rabies. So we were just, my dad and I were strolling, and we met a dog that was like, we had the rabies, like, it was bubbling, and I was like, what's wrong with that dog? I was telling my dad. I was a very young kid. And the dog was very wild. It was barking. It was about to attack us. And I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. The dog and I, at that time, were about the same size. So and I, if we're gotten to the ring with the dog with rabies versus me, very inexperienced in life in combat, I would lose. I would definitely get rabies. Pero what happened was my dad was there. So what he put me in front. It's like, anak, like Abraham sacrificed Isaac, ikaw na. Biro lang po. So what he did was he said, stay behind me. Stay behind me. And what he did was we just walked like this. So he just put me behind there and we just walked around the dog. And of course he had his guard up. He was protecting me. Good, long story short, and good thing the dog didn't attack us. He just was going crazy. But my dad was there. I was still very terrified. It's like, my God, my dad, my father. But I was comforted because of his presence. I knew my dad would protect me. I knew he would do everything in his power to stop that rabid dog. I was so confident. He would never throw me and leave me and run for the car. I knew it. It was just a relationship, I guess. I just knew he's my dad. He's gonna protect me. He's gonna be there for me. He's gonna defend me. And that was the point David was trying to make. I will not be afraid because God is with me. I am rested in God. And the rest is not a temporary rest. I leave and I rest. I leave and I rest. It's the state of constant rest in God. It's the state of turning to God in every single situation of my life. And it said, even when I walk through the valley of death, I am not afraid. You are close beside me. You guard me. You guide me all the way. And Dallas Willard says this. He says, if you will take time required to come to know and trust God as He is. Let's just pause there. If you come and take the time required to know and trust God as He is, that He's the shepherd, He's the great provider, He's the protector, He's the Heavenly Father. If we will just take the time. That's why verse 2 and 3 is so important. A lot of times we go, Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. Let's go to the valley. Let's face my trials. Let's face my hard times. Let's face this difficult issue. It's like, no, we actually need verse 2 and 3. We need the rest. We need to take time to be still, lie down, so that we can really know and understand who God is, for who He is. So if we take that time to know and trust God as He is, asking the Lord to give light to your mind, you can come to a place of perfect peace and fearlessness. Can I repeat that, po? You can come to a place of perfect peace and fearlessness because God is with you. You can live without fear. You can live without fear. And I'll repeat it because I know you need it. You can live without fear. This is precisely what the shepherd's psalm is talking about. You can live without fear. This is not fiction. This is not a movie scenario. This is not a movie script where it's like, oh, that character lives without fear. I wish that's me. I want to live without. No, that can be you. That can be your life right now. You can live without fear. You can live without the fear of insecurity. You can live without the fear of being abandoned. You can live without the fear of being rejected. You can live without the fear of being outcasted. You can live without fear because He's with you. We can end right there. And even Dallas Willard said, I was so tempted to call my book Live with No Fear because that is so central to our walk with God. Then when we're close to God, we realize we can live without fear. There's nothing to fear. What is there to fear when you have God? What's there to worry about if God is that shepherd and He's going to guide you? He's the one that's going to protect you. He's the one that's beside you. But you see, fear is the absence of security. Okay po? It's not the absence of courage. Sometimes, yes, we need courage and we need courage to overcome fear. But a lot of times in our own understanding, I think it's the absence of security. It's the absence of that guardian. And when we are far away from the guardian, we tend to fear. So we can live a life without fear. And let's continue po, chapter 23, 5 and 6. You provide delicious food for me in the presence of my enemies. You have welcomed me as your guest. Blessings overflow. Your goodness and unfailing kindness shall be with me all of my life, and afterwards I will live with you forever in your home. So verse 5 and 6 po, talks about abundance. I have so plenty. God provides for me. So it's no longer just an emotional shepherd. It's not just a physical shepherd that guides me and protects me. Now it just becomes to the point of even protecting me from my enemies. I can enjoy life. I can have more than I need. God is beyond my own needs. God goes beyond that. Even though there are enemies, even though there are people that are against me, that He can provide for me and them. That's how good God is. And lastly, verse 6, God's goodness, the shepherd's goodness, and His unfailing kindness will be with me all my life. What does this mean po? Alex Shute says it this way. He says, the mercy here comes from the Hebrew word hesed, which depicts God's covenant faithfulness. So he goes back. So David even understood the timeless character of God. He understood that God was not just the God of today, but He was also a God of yesterday. He's deriving the same theme of what He promised Moses, the covenant relationship that Israel, the entire nation Israel had in the past, and is connecting it through the times and the changes. Can you imagine? His ancestors were slaves. Now he's living in a kingdom and Israel is recognized as a nation. Can you imagine the drastic difference of a lifestyle? And there were slaves. He's a king. But he understood that God is a timeless God. God is a God that has become our shepherd since the beginning of time. He reminds us to rest. And even in this moment, He says, your faithfulness has so much connection to the past. Your hesed. So David claims that the same God who faithfully rescued the Israelites from Egypt and provided guidance and provision in the wilderness is the same faithful God he served. David experienced the goodness and mercy of God from His tender care. He lived in the confident hope that it would continue for the rest of his life. He's taking that word, and it's so deep, so profound. Because he's saying, now the God that guided my people through the ages, the God that helped Joshua cross the river into the promised land, the God that has allowed me to build a nation and become their king, that God, that same timeless shepherd will always guide me, will always be with me, and your goodness, your kindness will follow me for all the rest of my life, and I will dwell. I will no longer just be a visitor. God, I want to be a resident now. I want to be part of this family. I want to be part of this home. I want to dwell in your house forever. And the good news is that's exactly what God invites you and I to become His sons and daughters, to dwell in His safekeeping forever. Forever and ever and ever and ever. That's the beauty of it, po. It's not a temporary visit. However, we treat ourselves as guests, don't we, po? When we come on a Sunday, when we come on a Saturday, we feel like guests. And maybe some of you are guests. You're invited by a friend, a family member. But I want to extend that invitation as God extended that invitation. You're always welcome to stay. You're always welcome to stay in the house of God. You're always welcome to be part of the family, part of the household, and allow God's faithfulness to guide you, to lead you, to protect you for the rest of your life. Hebrews 13 says it in verse 8. Maybe this is a verse that we can memorize. It's very simple. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Maybe we can say it together. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's been the timeless God, our timeless shepherd that constantly, timelessly invites us. My child, life is so chaotic, isn't it? My child, things are moving too fast, isn't it? My child, work is heavy, isn't it? Things are so busy, isn't it? Why don't you take a rest with me? Let every week just be a reminder of rest. Rest in me. All who are weary and heavily burdened, come to me and I will give you rest. So this week, what can we do, po? It's the same thing we've been doing every week. Show up, find rest, because good things come to those who rest. Good things come to those who rest. How do we rest? It's the same thing we've been doing every week, like I said. We rest by just showing up. We rest by worshiping together. We rest by enjoying each other's company. We rest by listening together. We rest by just, again, receiving that invitation from God and accepting that invitation and saying, Lord, I just want to be, again, can I stay a little while? Can I stay a little while longer today? So when we worship together, it becomes a sense of resting as well. As simple as that. So what we can do, po, is to sing songs, pray, worship. Let our hearts again just be aligned to God and say, just invite Him again and say, God, just be my shepherd today. A.J. Swoboda. What a cool name, po, right? Says, this act of gathering to worship, in the words of Stanley Hauerwas and Samuel Wells, the most regular way the most Christians remind themselves and others that they are Christians. It is the most significant way in which Christianity takes flesh, evolving from a set of ideas and convictions to a set of practices and a way of life. Worship is the way the church reminds itself of who it is and who it worships. When we come together, when we take our Sabbath, when we take our pause, when we take our rest, that is that reminder in itself. When we see one another, when we gather together, that itself is a reminder that we are to rest in God. Hey, you are tired. You look very tired. And the person can say it back out of, you look very tired. And we can say, let's go rest. Let's take a rest. Let's worship together. Let's be refreshed together. Let this rest not just be an idea or a theory. Let's put it into practice. Let's come together as a church. Let's worship together. Let's really find rest in our